Aikido dubs itself as a martial art which doesn't hurt the other person who's attacking you. So, that would be great for example, security guards or policemen, or if you want to sustain someone who's a close family member to you, like, somebody's drunk in a party and giving trouble, and you don't want to hurt them because, he's like your cousin or whatever, but you need to sustain him somehow. So the ideal that Aikido was aiming for would be great in those situations. Now, the reality, unfortunately, is different. And while, let's say, even if O-sensei was able to do that because he was a talented martial artist, and maybe his top students were able to do that, there are stories that, they would deal with conflict efficiently. At the same time, historically, most of O-sensei's students were achieved martial artists in other martial arts already. Most of them were high-level judoka or karateka. And since he was so famous, they would go to him and they would study with him and they would take on the aspect of Aikido, but they knew how to handle themselves. Like, there's a story of one of the main, most talented students of O-sensei, Koichi Tohei, who later went on to create this kind of spiritual style of his own. But I think he was a really high-level judoka, and there's a story where I believe a wrestler, like a Western wrestler, comes and challenges Koichi Tohei. And actually, I think he challenges the school, and says, prove me that works. And O-sensei is already old, so he doesn't take it on himself, and he says, Koichi, go take care of it. And he deals with this high-level Western wrestler. He kind of, he's able to win against him, but I don't think it came just from Aikido. I think it came mainly from, his judo background, and also to Aikido, especially in that kind of period. There was a while when Aikido or Sensei's dojo was called Oni Dojo. I think that's the Japanese term, or the Demon Dojo, because they would have like bloody knees, and because of sitting on the knees all the time so much, and they would train like 5 times per day. The training was hardcore. They were not like light and easy with each other, and especially because if you look at the first episode where you know the history of Aikido, a lot of the young Japanese men, they actually wanted to they felt they lost their honor because Japan lost in the war, and they wanted to kind of win that back. So they were really aggressive and wanting to become powerful warriors. That's kind of one of the take where how you look, which you can see when you look at the story. So, and O-sensei himself, he was a badass in his youth, and I think a lot of people were inspired about that too. So basically, he had this culture of these young guys training like hell with heavy martial arts background beforehand. So yeah, probably they were tough warriors as much as Aikido founder himself. But the thing is, the further he went, the more lighter he made Aikido, and the more softer. And if you take, and this is kind of where I feel Aikido is in the current day, if you take someone who just comes into an Aikido dojo without any background in other martial arts, Aikido is trained in a way where there's no resistance. It's a very light way of training, very cooperative. And while some Aikidoka believe that it's an effective way of training, in reality, I'll just tell you a short answer, it's not. If you want to learn to fight, you need to fight. And in Aikido, there's zero fighting, and or zero actually real defending. It's just kind of choreography. You're just repeating the same motions with a partner who's letting you do them. And I think the more the world continued to go, the more Aikido went into this realm. And also, I believe personally that most of the Aikido instructors were also challenged because O-sensei's philosophy was, since we're all part of the same family, that it doesn't make sense to fight each other. So he was kind of neglecting the aspect of competition. While competition, again, to give you a brief summary, it leads to purification of technique. When you're in competition, you have two people who are really trying to overcome each other, and your technique has to really work well because there are two experts dealing with, an expert dealing with another expert. When there's no competition, there's no pressure testing, there's no way for you to, there's no actually motive for you to really make your techniques work. You just kind of play around with each other and you think it works, but you never really test them with a person who's really trying to get you, especially in a style such as Aikido, because that competitive aspect is disregarded. And there's one particular style of Aikido which does have competition, but even then it looks kind of weird. Long story again. But then I personally think that the world of Aikido was challenged because of that. And Aikido students, the main high-level students, they were left with the legacy of Morihei Ueshiba, very spiritual, very religious guy, believing in the mystics and so on, and believing in this world peace, and having went through this long journey to come to that conclusion. And most of his students were just badass martial artists who just wanted, to be great, and they wanted to learn from the best. And Sensei was known as one of the best at the day. And so, after his death, basically, you could look at it that way. You have a bunch of these tough guys who know theoretically the idea of Aikido's peace and harmony and so on and so forth, and they have to portray to other people, but they're not as established as in it as Sensei was, and everyone is kind of looking at them and expecting them to know what the heck he was talking about. But the thing is, one more thing, and a controversy and a difficult subject, kind of a challenge of Aikido, which sometimes is spoken of, sometimes people are silent about it. But I actually had the pleasure of meeting a person who was a friend of Morihei Ueshiba, the founder, and he's a Westerner. His name is Robert Nadeau, and he would tell stories about, like, real life stories. He lived in Japan and met with Sensei many, many times at his last kind of late stage of his life. And so I would hear direct stories of what was really going on. And one of the stories really struck me was that, based on Robert Nadeau, Sensei would sometimes go on these tangents where he would just start to talk about spirituality and kind of his religious beliefs, and he would do that for hours and hours, and he would do it instead of training. He was supposed to teach, but he would start to talk about that spirituality side of things. And one thing is, first of all, Sensei was really deeply devoted to it, and he was his way of explaining his religious beliefs were very complicated. There were a lot of Shintoistic theories and symbols and kind of religious beliefs and technicalities, kind of the whole mythology. If you weren't aware of, he would quote that all the time. He would use like terms like Izanagi, Izanami, or what's that? Anyway, I forgot. There's the dragon name, which he believed he became an embodiment of. Like, it's a whole complicated thing. And he would talk in those kind of complicated aspects, and nobody would get it. Nobody knew what he's talking about, because he had, again, a bunch of young badasses who had no clue about spirituality or religion. And so sometimes Sensei would go into these tangents, which not a lot of people understood what he's talking about. That was the difficulty. If you read some of the translations, it's like, even today, it's like, what the heck he's talking about? Like, there's some ideas which, like, there's this small great book, Art of Peace, where some of his best ideas and most simple ideas are portrayed also in English, and they're beautiful. Some of them are really nice, but even then, sometimes of them are like, what the heck is he talking about? But if you read some of the bigger books of how he spoke and what he spoke about, it's like, holy crap, it's a maze there. And so back to Robert Nadeau, he's sitting there, and Sensei goes on a tangent, and a couple of senior students are standing by the door, and they see, and he witnesses that, Robert Nadeau witnesses that, he sees some of his, some other students are kind of, late to class or coming to the next class, and they're heading towards the dojo, and the senior students come out and say, like, show him, don't come, the guy is talking, there's going to be no class, don't waste your time. And those were, based on the story, those were senior students of Morihei Ueshiba. So that shows that they weren't deeply interested, or most of them weren't deeply interested in what he was talking about. Yet now, after, they're being sent to the world to spread the word of Aikido, or especially after Sensei's death, everybody's looking up to them. Everybody wants them to explain to them, like, what is that thing that Morihei Ueshiba was talking about? And they have no clue, and they have to guess. So that's a huge challenge that I think most of them never overcame, and I think most of Aikido students are still struggling with it, or instructors. They're trying to make sense of what Sensei was talking about, but it's so tough to get to the point of it. And then you have the physical aspect, which is an important thing to address as well. Because the thing is, if you want to defend yourself, there's almost no way to avoid violence. Unless you're talking your way out, maybe, or you're showing that you can defend yourself and the conflict stops. That's kind of how Morihei Ueshiba did it a few times in his life based on the stories. But thing is, without violence, it's almost impossible. And the irony is, even if you look at most of Aikido techniques, they're potentially deadly. Most of them. Like Shihonage, where you turn under the arm and you throw the person to the ground. If the person doesn't know how to fall, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm putting on a video right now. If you don't know how to fall, there's a huge chance you will hit your head at concrete with the back of your head, and you might die easily. Some of the throws as well, if you don't know how to fall, you will get injured badly. So it's almost mind-boggling. So how did Aikido people believe, or even our sensei, if you question that openly, how did he believe, that this is peaceful? If the techniques, if you will resist them, and a person who will attack you will resist them, you'll probably break his arms and maybe bash his head and kill him. And you could continue on to talk about this whole bigger aspect of protection. Or in other words, you're killing that person or you're injuring him for the sake of the better whole. You're protecting him from himself. But I never heard particularly Morihiro Shiba talk about that himself. Now, if you're looking at the martial arts aspect of Aikido, or the aspect of protecting an attacker from himself, the best solution that I've come across through training martial arts in a devoted way for years is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Because it's a very capable martial art, which actually does have competition, but it tends to create humble individuals more often than not. And it's a lot about choking out the other person, or isolating him on the ground, which is actually kind of what Aikido aims for. But if you really want to create a peaceful outcome without hurting the other person, choking out the person is the best possible solution. Because you're not hurting him, he's passing out. And the thing is, and that's what one of my main mentors and friend talks about, Matt Thornton, head coach of Straight Blast Gym. He talks about this, and I agree with him 100%, because pain compliance is not always going to work. If a person is on drugs or intoxicated, or the adrenaline comes in, you can break his arm and he can still attack you. The body can do amazing things. But then if you choke a person out, he's out. And he cannot do anything about it. So if you want to find a martial art which is really effectively potentially can deal with a physical conflict in a peaceful way without hurting another person, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is your best take in my opinion. Aikido, unfortunately, is not that I can perceive in any way. The best thing that I think Aikido can strive for, and hopefully it does create,